There is a specific kind of starvation that only happens when you're sitting at a full table. You smile at your friends, you laugh with your partner, you say, "I'm fine." But the moment the door closes, the silence is so loud it actually hurts physically. Why do you feel lonelier in a crowd than you do in an empty room? Because the world doesn't know you. They only know the character you built to survive them. You're screaming behind a sheet of glass, and everyone is just complimenting your reflection. We're about to perform a psychological autopsy on your loneliness, and the cause of death was silence. Part 1. The Invisible Prison. You're standing in a room full of people who call you a friend, or perhaps you're lying next to a partner who claims to love you, and yet you feel a sensation that is physically indistinguishable from starvation. It is a hollow, cold ache in the center of your chest that no amount of conversation seems to fill. You have asked yourself if you are broken, if you are ungrateful, or if you are simply destined to be an outsider looking in at the warmth of the human experience. But what if I told you that this feeling is not a malfunction, but a signal? What if the loneliness you feel has nothing to do with the absence of people, and everything to do with the absence of yourself? Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, diagnosed this condition nearly a century ago when he noted that loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you, or from holding certain views which others find inadmissible. This is not just a poetic quote, it is a clinical diagnosis of a phenomenon known as existential isolation. To understand why you feel this way, we must peel back the layers of your psyche and look at the terrifying mechanics of human connection. The truth is, most of us are not actually engaging with other people. We're merely smashing our masks together. You are lonely because the person interacting with the world is not you. It is a construct, a bodyguard, a curated performance designed to ensure your survival, but the cost of that survival is the death of your connection. Part 2. The birth of the persona. Let's look at the mechanism behind this using a concept Jung called the persona. In ancient Greece, the word persona referred to the masks worn by actors on stage to project their voice and define their role. You have a persona. It is the social face the individual presents to the world. A kind of mask designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. You built this mask for a reason. Evolutionarily, human beings are pack animals. In the pre-modern world, expulsion from the tribe meant death by starvation or predation. Therefore, the human brain is hardwired with a primal terror of rejection. To avoid rejection, you learned very early on to scan your environment and determine what behavior was rewarded and what behavior was punished. You learned that being polite was safe. You learned that being agreeable was safe. You learned that suppressing your darker, weirder, or more intense thoughts kept the peace. Over decades, this mask hardened. You became the good employee, the stable partner, the funny friend, the listener. You perfected a character that is digestible to others. But here is the dark psychological twist that creates your loneliness. You've worn the mask for so long that you have forgotten it is a mask. You have identified with the performance. The tragedy is that when people love you, they are loving the persona, not the self. They love the version of you that is easy to deal with. They love the version that hides its needs. And deep down, your subconscious mind knows this. It whispers to you that if you were to actually show your true face, your fears, your bizarre theories, your selfishness, your grief, that this love would evaporate. This creates a psychological paradox where the more praise you receive, the lonelier you feel. You're like a starving man watching a statue of himself eat a banquet. The statue is full, but you are dying. Part 3. The false self and the mother wound. To understand how you got here, we have to go deeper than Jung, into the work of the psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott. Winnicott introduced the concept of the false self. He argued that this split begins in childhood. When you were a child, you had a true self, a spontaneous, uncurated way of being. You cried when you were sad, you screamed when you were angry, and you spoke your imagination without a filter. However, if your environment, specifically your primary caregivers, could not handle that spontaneity, you were forced to adapt. If your sadness was met with "stop crying," or your excitement was met with "be quiet," or your fears were met with dismissal, you learned that your true self was a burden. To survive, you developed a false self, a personality explicitly designed to manage the emotions of the people around you. You learned to be good so that your parents wouldn't be stressed. You learned to be quiet so you wouldn't be a nuisance. This is called pathological accommodation. You accommodated the needs of others at the expense of your own reality. Fast forward 20 years. You're now an adult who's an expert at reading the room. You can sense what other people want you to be within seconds of meeting them, and you effortlessly shift into that shape. You are a chameleon. But the cost of being a chameleon is that you have no color of your own. This is why you feel lonely in a crowd. You are performing a script written by a frightened child who just wanted to be safe. You are lonely because you are hiding, and you cannot be found if you are hiding. Part 4. The shadow and the repression of vitality. This repression leads us to one of the most dangerous concepts in psychology, the shadow. Jung described the shadow as the unknown dark side of the personality. It consists of everything you have shoved into the basement of your subconscious because you deemed it unacceptable. This includes your aggression, your sexuality, your selfishness, and your envy. But, and this is the part most people miss, the shadow also contains your gold. It contains your creativity, your intense passion, your unique insights, and your true power. Because you were taught that intense people are too much, you threw your intensity into the shadow. Because you were taught that disagreeable people are bad, you threw your backbone into the shadow. When you repress the dark, you also repress the light. You become flat. You become grey. And when you interact with others from this flat grey place, you cannot form deep connections. Deep human connection requires limbic resonance, a biological synchronization of emotional states. But if you are suppressing your emotions to maintain your persona, you are blocking this resonance. You're offering people a sanitized, sterilized version of a human being. It is boring, it is safe, and it is incredibly lonely. People can sense this intuitively. They might like you, but they won't feel drawn to you. They won't feel that magnetic pull of shared humanity because you have turned your magnet off. You are lonely because you're withholding your humanity. You're guarding a treasure chest that no one is allowed to see, and then crying because no one values your treasure. Part 5. The neuroscience of social pain. It is important to understand that this pain is not just in your head, it is in your biology. Neuroscientific studies using fMRI scans have shown that the brain processes social exclusion in the exact same region that processes physical pain, the anterior cingulate cortex. When you feel unseen or misunderstood, your brain registers it as a physical threat. This is because, for our ancestors, being misunderstood meant being out of sync with the tribe, which was a precursor to exile. Your body is flooding with cortisol, the stress hormone, because it believes you are in danger. This creates a vicious cycle. The more lonely you feel, the more threatened you feel. The more threatened you feel, the more you retreat behind your persona to stay safe. The more you retreat, the lonelier you become. Modern society exacerbates this with what sociologists call hyperconnection without intimacy. We've built a world of digital signals where we communicate constantly but say absolutely nothing. We trade likes and comments, which act as cheap dopamine hits that simulate connection but provide no nutritional value to the soul. It is the equivalent of eating cardboard. It fills the stomach, but it does not nourish the body. You are scrolling through a feed of other people's personas, comparing your shadow to their highlight reel, and deepening the chasm of your own isolation. Part 6. The fear of being too much. Let's address the specific fear that keeps this mechanism in place. The fear of being too much. This is the most common confession in therapy rooms. You believe that if you were to speak your actual thoughts, the strange, philosophical, dark or complex thoughts that race through your mind at 2 a.m., that people would recoil. You believe your inner world is a burden. But this belief is a cognitive distortion. The psychological reality is the pratfall effect. Research shows that people who are competent but flawed are more likable than people who appear perfect. Perfection creates distance. Vulnerability creates bridges. When you share something real, something slightly embarrassing, or something raw, you break the social contract of politeness and invite the other person to do the same. Think about the people you feel deepest with. Are they the people who are always polite and perfect? No. They are the people who've seen you messy, who have heard your darkest jokes, who know your insecurities. Loneliness is the tax you pay for perfection. If you want to stop feeling lonely, you must be willing to be messy. You must be willing to be too much for some people, because that is the only way you will be enough for the right people. Part 7. The process of individuation. So, how do we dismantle the prison? Jung proposed a solution called individuation. Individuation is the process of integrating the conscious and the unconscious, the persona and the shadow, into a unified whole. It is the journey of becoming who you actually are. This is not a passive process. It is an active rebellion against your conditioning. To break the cycle of loneliness, you must start engaging in what psychologists call radical authenticity. This does not mean being rude or oversharing with strangers. It means closing the gap between what you think and what you say. It means that when you feel a pang of sadness, you do not smile. It means that when you have a weird thought, you risk saying it aloud. You have to test the hypothesis that you are unlovable. Currently, your hypothesis is, if I show my true self, I will be rejected. You have to run the experiment. You have to drop the mask just for a moment and see what happens. Yes, some people will leave. This is painful, but it is necessary. The people who leave were only attached to your mask, not you. Their departure is not a loss. It is a filtration process. You are clearing the room of the wrong audience to make space for the right one. Part 8. The role of conflict in connection. One of the biggest barriers to deep connection is the avoidance of conflict. You likely believe that conflict causes separation, but in healthy psychology, conflict is a form of intimacy. It is two different realities crashing into each other and trying to find a shared truth. If you never disagree, if you never voice a contrary opinion, you are not in a relationship, you're in a monologue. The other person is just projecting onto a blank screen. By avoiding conflict to keep the peace, you are actually waging a war against intimacy. You are preventing the other person from knowing your boundaries, your values, and your edges. You cannot respect someone who has no edges. To cure your loneliness, you must be willing to be disagreeable. You must be willing to say no, I disagree, or that hurt me. In that friction, heat is generated, and that heat is what warms the cold ache in your chest. Part 9. The spectator and the participant. There is a philosophical concept known as the spectator versus participant mode of existence. The lonely person is often stuck in spectator mode. You watch conversations happen, you watch life unfold, you analyze, you judge, you observe, but you do not enter. You are safe in the observation tower, but it is cold up there. To connect, you must descend into the arena. You must become a participant. This requires the suspension of the ego. The ego wants to protect you from looking foolish. But looking foolish is the price of admission for human connection. Every time you open your mouth to say something real, you risk looking foolish. Do it anyway. The pain of looking foolish lasts for a minute. The pain of loneliness lasts for a lifetime. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. It is a privilege, but it is also a battle. You are fighting against your biological programming that tells you to hide. You're fighting against your childhood conditioning that tells you to be quiet." Part 10. Reclaiming the voice. The journey out of loneliness is not about finding more people. It is about finding your voice. It is about realizing that your weirdness is actually your frequency. Imagine you are a radio station broadcasting a very specific, unique song. But because you are afraid no one will like the song, you stop broadcasting. You play static instead. You play the same white noise as everyone else. Of course no one tunes in. Of course no one finds you. But if you start playing your song, your true, unedited, authentic song, yes, many people will tune out. They won't like the genre. But the people who do like that genre, they will finally be able to find you. You're lonely because you've turned off your signal. Turn it back on. Speak the thing you are afraid to speak. Admit the thing you are ashamed to admit. Ask the question you think is too deep for a Tuesday afternoon. In conclusion, you do not need to be fixed because you are not broken. You are simply hidden. The cure for the pain you feel is not in the external world. It is in the courage to dismantle the walls you built to protect yourself. As Jung said, the world will ask you who you are, and if you do not know, the world will tell you. Do not let the world tell you who to be. Loneliness is the price you pay for self-betrayal. Connection is the reward you get for self-loyalty. So I challenge you today, not tomorrow, not next week, today. Find one moment where you would normally hide, and choose to reveal instead. Find one moment where you would normally agree, and choose to tell the truth instead. It will feel dangerous, your heart will race. But in that moment of terrified honesty, you will feel something you haven't felt in a long time. You will feel real, and once you feel real, you will never settle for being invisible again. If you are ready to stop hiding, if you are ready to begin the work of individuation, then this is your starting line. Do not just consume this video as entertainment. Let it be the permission slip you've been waiting for. Speak, be seen, and let the right people find you.